So for everybody coming on, go ahead and put your contact info in the chat room, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. I want to give the Senate President a chance to tell us about what the new session, what the session is going to look like coming up on Monday. You don't have to tell us now. We'll wait for later on in the program. Hey, good morning, Miller.
Hey, morning. How are you?
Good. So Jeannie, Jackie said that she wasn't going to make it this morning.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll just give it one more minute.
I think I have my copy.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. This is the 13th in a row convening of the Broadband Hui, and want to thank everybody for staying with us for this consecutive meetup every week on Wednesday at 9. So the Broadband Hui, for some of the new people that are joining us, was really started as a result of the pandemic, and we wanted to get people together to understand what are some of the challenges, what are some of the gaps that is currently created as a result of everybody sheltered at home and pretty much isolated. So basically, broadband became the key mechanism by which people could stay connected. And so over the course of the last 13 weeks, we've been identifying short-term, and as we kind of continue to have these discussions, we want to look at what are some of the midterm and long-term objectives that we as a Hui can continue to address to ensure that Hawaii is well positioned to be not only connected, but how do we stay competitive in this 21st century and leverage this broadband infrastructure to accomplish that connectivity. So that's kind of the purpose of the Broadband Hui. And what we do in the beginning for the new folks, we kind of just go around the room real quickly. We have the regulars, and everybody should be putting their contact info, or at least their name and affiliation in the chat, so that we can at least capture that. And then we'll do a quick introduction for some of the new folks as I identify them across the the Zoom call. And we'll do a quick introduction, who you are, and what organization you're with, and then we'll sort of then we'll dive into some of the agenda items that I currently put on the list. So with that, again, my name is Bert Lum. I'm the strategy officer for broadband here at the state of Hawaii. I'm in the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. And I'd like to give the next introduction to Jeannie, because she's one of my co-conspirators here on the Broadband Hui.
Good morning, everybody. Jeannie Skog. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Alliance of Hawaii, and we are involved in this because broadband expansion is one of our priority efforts within the Economic Development Alliance of Hawaii. So we've been working on an update of the strategic plan for broadband, which will be a great platform for seeking funding, certainly, but for other just sort of coalescing thinking and updating opportunities and challenges. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. We have Na'alehu, Anthony. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Na'alehu Anthony for the Aina Aloha Initiative. I'm also longtime fan of Bert and his work in the work in figuring out how to get us connected, whether it's island to island or from a canoe in the middle of the Pacific. We've had great discussions about how to get all that done. So looking forward to the call today. Thank you.
Thanks, Na'alehu. Let's see, we have, it looks like everybody's pretty much kind of regulars on the call. Lisa Kim, I know you were on the first call, and I want to give you a chance to just say hi to everybody.
Hi, this is Lisa Kim. I'm from the DCCA. I'm the cable administrator, and we are, monitoring and very involved and understand the importance of broadband, and we're here to join Bert here.
Thanks, Lisa. Looks like everybody else is regulars. Did I miss anybody? Does anybody want to give a quick intro? We have
Bert,
Senate President.
Oh, sorry.
Senate President, you want to say hi? He's busy drinking his coffee. So, what I wanted to start off with is the fact that, this meeting is kind of important because it's going to lead into the session. And, this year, the session has been really an interesting, opening and recessing. And right now there's a recess going on, and the next opportunity for the legislators to get together is going to be on the 22nd, which is Monday. So over the course of the, the Hui calls and some of the projects that have been proposed, we were very encouraged by the legislators expressing interest in some of the grassroots projects that we were taking on, and those were things like Wi-Fi on wheels, the community networks, looking at various forms of let's say mobile telehealth. There's a number of things that came up that were encouraging as far as projects. And so we were looking at how would legislation sort of unfold if the legislature came back in and reconvened. So during the course of these past weeks, we've kind of brainstormed and trying to figure out like what would be the best vehicle by which some of these potential projects could go forward. Senate President, do you want to say anything about what's coming up in the next sort of opening of the session?
Oh, not sure if he can.
Ron, are you guys hearing? Wanted to just give you a chance to talk a little bit about the opening of the session.
Oh, there he is.
Well, we're going to open on the 22nd, and we're going to adjourn And we're not going to recess. Congress won't act on the Heroes Bill till maybe August, and so with the requirement to spend the CARES money by December 31st, we're going to be appropriating out the little over $600 million in CARES funds, to the appropriate areas that fall under the guidelines. We have some other bills that we will be picking up, and we'll see how it all plays out. And then we'll be making an announcement Friday, the speaker and I.
Okay, thanks. So, during the course of the Hui call, what we've tried to do is look particularly at Senate Bill 2527. So I think many of you are familiar with that. And, we were looking at trying to draft some language that would perhaps accommodate what we looked at as a broadband innovation grant program. But after some recent discussions that I've had, the bill in its current form really helps to address the idea of infrastructure. And it was originally written to try to get some monies toward building infrastructure so that the carriers could potentially tap that resource and run fiber to various communities and census blocks. And what I think for the purpose of trying to at least get some legislation considered, we've looked at the current bill, and probably we'll go ahead and support that current bill. And then what we'll do is we'll look at actually working on a more well-crafted innovation grant bill for the 2021 session. So I wanted to sort of give people an idea that, there's definitely interest in supporting broadband from the legislature. There may not be any money for actually doing, this grant program at this stage of the game. But I think the fact that it gets into statute, it gets recognized by the legislature, is a good thing. So that's kind of my take on it, and I just wanted to put that out there and see if there's any feedback on sort of the current state of legislation with respect to broadband.
The other thing I would just tell you briefly, after last week's meeting, Ken sent an email out, I guess, maybe to the Kauai contacts. So Councilmember Evslin was very interested in participating. Unfortunately, council meetings are at 9 o'clock on Wednesdays, and then I was able to get in touch with Mike DeHealy, the managing director. He put Mel in touch with his finance director and IT person, and we're working on the interface with the $1.5 million that the county is spending and trying to see, where they're going to be wiring up as we're looking at our connectivity fukas for, the DOE students. So, we are working with Kauai County, and if you guys later on continue on and find a way, and it's not 9 o'clock on Wednesdays, Councilmember Evslin would be happy to engage, and we do have some of the county administrative people on board, and we're trying to partner with how they're going to spend the money they have.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think a lot of the projects that we've been talking about over the course of the last 13 weeks, have been successful at forging a way forward to get monies to get their projects off the ground. So I think Wi-Fi on Wheels is a perfect example of a project that was successful at moving the needle. And so the question becomes, how does that potentially scale, and how do we start to continue to foster an environment to support those kinds of projects? And Senate President, I did take your advice to reach out to some of the counties, and the county put out a report called this is Kauai County. They put out something called Kauai Forward, and you can go check it out at kauaiforward.com. And I had a good conversation with a fellow by the name of Warren Doy, and he will join us next week and talk a little bit about that plan, because the section that he helped head up had a lot to do with the future of Kauai, and the recognition that broadband is an important facet of that came out strongly in that plan. So I did want to feature that next week. And then I'm also, we have representation on this call from Maui and the Big Island as well. So, as we kind of get an idea as to what the counties on Maui as well as Hawaii Island are doing, we definitely try to include that into our discussions here. So, in terms of, again, the path forward from a policy standpoint, I like the idea of, a grant program for infrastructure. So we can move that forward, that would be good. And then commitment on the part of some of the key stakeholders that we put together something for an innovation grant moving into 2021. That would be really good. Now, given the fact that if there is a chance that the infrastructure grant does pass forward, there is a process called rulemaking, and one of the things that I'm highly advising is that there's, if you look at the language, there's a requirement for rulemaking to be done in 180 days, and I think given that there's not going to be any appropriation at this stage of the game, it's probably good to push that out. So I'm hoping that we can push the rulemaking process out further, maybe toward the end of 2021. So give us some time to work on it. And there's going to be a lot of stuff happening with broadband. And thanks to everybody on this call, whether it's the infrastructure grant or work on the innovation grant, we're also spending a lot of time, I am, on a grant application to the Economic Development Administration, EDA. And I'm working with people like Melissa, who's also on the call today, on getting that. So, from the federal side, there is strong support for, I've told them about the project, and this is a cable landing project. And I'm happy to share that with, the Hui as we get further down the line. But if we can get federal money to do the cable landing project, state support for infrastructure grant as well as innovation grant would really help to tell the right story about how Hawaii is supportive of this whole broadband initiative. And I think through the innovation grant program, we could also build into it programs around digital equity. So I feel strongly about that kind of direction and development for broadband. So not only adjusting the big pipes coming in, but how do we create equity for all in terms of taking advantage and benefiting from the digital infrastructure, and so we could all participate in the digital economy. So anyway, that's kind of where we're headed, and again, I wanted to let people know that that's kind of where we're thinking, given the fact that it's going to be a short window coming up on Monday, and I'll be looking at 25, 27, making sure that proceeds forward, as well as what happens with HB 1062 on the House side. So with that, again, I wanted to just open it up for any questions regarding some of the policy stuff that we're working on.
Or this
Okay.
is Will.
Yes.
I don't have necessarily a question, but I do think what you just said is really important for everyone to understand, that this is when you're talking about broadband, it's the full network, from the landing site to the terrestrial to what a lot of the folks on here are doing great work as far as the end users and access and all those things. So it all has to be addressed in order to have that robust system. So I think this is a really good way. And My hope is that this group or subgroup or whatever that is continues working together to, be able to craft that legislation and put that together. So I think it's a really good idea.
Thanks, Will. My intent is to keep this dialogue going and have discussions as it pertains to short-term, short-term, midterm, and long-term. And you're right, Will. What has really helped for all of us to kind of better understand is what is our state's commitment to broadband, and if it wasn't for the fact that you folks have all diligently participated in this call, we would not have really heard about the community projects and efforts that are going on, and it really helps shine the light on the digital gaps that exist. So we want to make sure that as a state we support those kinds of efforts, as well as the things like cable landings, because if I were to go out and just try to promote cable landings, people might not really appreciate what does that have to do with any of their challenges in terms of getting connected. So I think as well as said, it's a total picture end to end, from how do we get connected to the rest of the world to how do we get connected to our most vulnerable and rural communities. So that's what the Hui is all about. And I applaud all of you for participating and taking an active role in this, and we want to keep this thing going. So anyway, that's
I have a question for you, Bert, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do either of the bills, and I haven't read them, I apologize, I think I would like to do that real soon, but do either of the bills address the last mile, any monies for that? Because that seems to be a problem, especially here on Kauai, but probably on all the neighbor islands, is that the density as you go out is low, and there's no incentive for Hawaiian Tel or Spectrum to really install the last mile.
Yeah, we have locations. I mean, there's some in the canoe complex where not only is there no hardline connection, there's no cellular connection either. There's others off Ka'u on the Big Island. So there's some real remote locations we've got.
Yeah, so Mark, again, the bills both were, whether it's HB 1062 or SB 2527, we'll put that in the in the chat for anybody who wants to go and research it. The idea was that monies would be made available for primarily the infrastructure providers, the carriers, to look at getting infrastructure out to communities that were considered underserved or unserved. Now, you might ask yourself, well, what about all the federal programs? And through the course of the last 13 weeks, I mean, we've had federal representation on talking about things like Reconnect funds, as well as RDOF funds, RDOF standing for Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and Hawaiian Tel has been on the call talking about their fiber project to Hana as an example, and that is coming out of something called Connect America funds. So what I would envision is that the 2527 would continue to build upon that. So if there's extensions of that network further into the communities, on any of the rural communities, that's where that money could be applied. But again, the state has been having to deal with balancing the budget, right? So this innovation or this infrastructure grant program may not come out with any money at this stage of the game. So and whatever money they do decide to appropriate, whether it's in 2021, I mean, it's going to be probably not as big as what the federal government might make available, but it still largely depends on the carriers applying and putting in their application for Reconnect or RDOF. So again, it's there's no guarantee that number one, that money is going to go specifically to a community deployment, but the vehicles are there to make that happen. And I don't know if Charter or Hawaiian Tel, if they're on the call. I know Meong is on the call, so Meong, you know what you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, thanks. I think you shared a lot of great comments. I really appreciate that. With respect to the last mile, I think that is the whole intent of this legislation over the past couple of years, and definitely through every partner and conversation and through this Hui, I think the whole intent is the last mile. It's not geared to the middle mile, I think, if you think about it. So it's actually the end user, what we're trying to provide, especially in the rural, unserved, remote communities. And I think this is definitely a good step forward. I think there are other issues in the broader spectrum of broadband, but this is absolutely something that is key for some of the neighbor islands. Thanks, Bert.
So Meong, since you're sharing your insights on it, how would a community, let's say on Kauai, like Mark's, if Mark has input into perhaps unserved or underserved, would that input play into how you decide if you want to apply for grant money and actually use that grant money for that particular location?
That would absolutely work. It would be through the authority, which is DBED, through the rulemaking process on the details of an application, the framework, what is required to submit an application. I think a lot of the conversation you made about rules definitely takes time. A lot of collaborative conversation and discussion that's required. So, given that, there is a short time limit, we totally understand, everyone is busy working. So, through that rulemaking process, what I could envision, and this is just me speaking, would be through DBED, identifying these pockets through conversations like this, reaching out to legislative officials on neighborhoods that need this last mile connection. And from there, DBED would provide with a request for information, RFP, or other means in terms of mechanisms to help garner support or commitments from the providers. I think that is, I'm talking, generally, of course, but, a lot of it does come down to the details and working collaboratively with DBED and identifying these locations.
Hey, Bert, can I ask you a question about that as well?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, this is Mike Bagley with Verizon. I was just wondering if you had a list of the high priority rural areas that have no cellular coverage. I would love to get something like that so I can run by my network people and see what we're doing. I have from time to time, they come to me and they are trying to get a site in an area that has a lack of coverage, and they're getting a lot of resistance. So I thought it might be helpful if you were aware of where we're trying to get something put in for infrastructure that would actually help with the broadband from the cellular standpoint. And then it would help us to know kind of what do you consider the hotspots in Hawaii that are not being served. So I just want to leverage this wonderful team we have here to try to push that, at least from the perspective of us as a carrier for cellular service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that absolutely does. And as I look at 25, 27, I don't think it's limited to just the wireline carriers. So it could potentially be a resource for wireless carriers as well. Again, there's no money in it right now, so that's kind of problematic. But as Meong just articulated, there will be a process to do some rulemaking, and through the process of rulemaking, we'll definitely reach out to the communities and find out what is there, what isn't there, and how can we help support deployment of infrastructure. And then we'll put it out to the providers to see what can you do to help connect these communities. And I know Verizon is actively doing that as well as AT&T. I know Elizabeth is on the call, and you know, she shared some of the challenges with trying to get to some remote areas, not remote, but you know, like Puna, that the community kind of objected to wireless connections, right? So how do we overcome that, you know, as a collaboration? So again, that's definitely on the playbook.
Yeah,
And
and
the more
Bert, even
support
if
we
we
get, the better.
even if we know the nature of the objections, we try to work with them. I mean, certainly you don't want to be in a community without working cooperatively with the community and make sure you understand the community's concerns. I think the good thing about carriers on the wireless side, speaking just for Verizon, is we don't need money. We will invest the money. We just need local cooperation so that we can do that. But we certainly want to make sure that we are cooperating with the community that would be served. I appreciate your comments.
Yeah,
is
and again,
Bert.
as a
Hey,
Oh,
Bert.
I was just going to
go ahead,
echo.
Elizabeth. Yeah.
I was just going to echo Mike's concerns. We totally agree with that.
Yeah, this is Mel. On a, I guess, more micro level, I wanted to put out there maybe a request to all of the wireless and landline carriers on the call. We're working on a project on a Kauai distance learning pilot, and we are securing some funding from philanthropy. We're at a point where we want to start looking at how do we strategically deploy those funds and what kind of initiatives we want to look at. We're going to be meeting with the county upcoming in the next week. And so I wanted to invite any interested carriers of contacting me so that we can have you all participate in the process. So we're not, you know, it's going to be a very mixed, I guess, delivery system with probably wired, wireless, you know, maybe some Wi-Fi mesh. You know, it depends on what we're trying to do on the island, but we want to be strategic. So I can put in a chat my email here. So all of you that's interested, please contact me so I can have you included.
And Mel, is this through the Hawaii Executive Collaborative?
I'm contracted by HCF, Hawaii Community Foundation, but I'll put my email up here, and I'm helping to coordinate this effort for our Kauai pilot. And we're now linking in the county because, as I think Senate President mentioned last time, that the county is also looking to use some of their care funds, yeah, for broadband. So I made contact with Mike DeHiglig, who's the city managing director, who Ron, Senate President, contacted for us, and I made contact. So we're proceeding forward, hopefully in a more strategic way.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, it'd be great if you got updates of the project as it moves along. You know, feel free to share with the Hui.
Hey, Bert, this is Will. Just one last thing, and somebody asked a question a few people ago about the last mile. So there's actually a draft that's been put out there. Like the bill itself that's in there now doesn't reference it as much. But after, you know, talking with these groups and all that, so we've been working on a proposed draft. That last mile language has been included to make sure it's called out directly. So just echoing what Myung said, we want to make sure we do that.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Will. All right. So appreciate everybody's feedback and input on some of this policy work that we're moving forward, and we'll keep you posted as, you know, obviously the next meeting on the 24th, we'll have an update on some of the bills and how they actually proceeded in terms of getting heard and everything. So we'll keep you folks all posted. Next up on the agenda, I wanted to, you know, as I look across the communities and see, you know, who is bringing community voice to looking at how to architect a better Hawaii. You know, one of the groups that I am really impressed with is the Aina Aloha folks, and I wanted to invite Na'alehu to share a little bit with, you know, with our Broadband Hui what Aina Aloha is all about, and of course what attracted me was the fact that they are definitely there's some geeks in the group there, and they make reference to innovation, digital economy as well as broadband. So that's like music to my heart. So now, Lejo, maybe you can describe what Aina Aloha is all about.
Yeah, Bert, thanks so much for allowing some time today in a very busy call in a run up to what's going to be a very busy week next week. So I really appreciate it, and I'll be brief and maybe take a couple questions afterwards. And absolutely, I'm a self-described geek when it comes to tech, and really my background is in trying to bring community voice through technology. A dozen years ago, we worked with Kamehameha Schools and what was then Oceanic Time Warner to be able to start a TV station for Things Hawaiian. And really what that's done, and the context for it a dozen years later, is it's really allowed us to think about the different ways in which people are using technology to connect each other. And as we have gone through this process, and we were the architects of sending stuff back from the Worldwide Voyage with Hokula, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, moving data is one of the most important things that we can do. And I think the way we interface is really like, what are we going to talk about as data opens up for everybody, and it lowers the barrier for entry for people who maybe felt like they haven't had a voice in the past. And so this Aina Aloha movement is really taking a look at how quickly our community is shifting and how critically important this idea of connectivity in all the different ways, whether it's to your community or whether it's to the outside world, is going to affect us and is going to change the way at which we interact into the future. If you look at it right now, for instance, like there are a number of Zoom calls that I'm working on as like broadcast pieces. PBS is embracing Zoom, Wavy TV is embracing Zoom. You see it on the morning news every morning. And what that means is that there's just like, it's so much easier for everybody to interact. You also have to have an internet connection now to quarantine for 14 days. You can have Instacart show up at your house rather than going out to go get the kind of things that you need every day. And so it's becoming increasingly clear. And I would also mention like what happens earlier this week when coverage drops nationally for one of the cell phone providers, and 89 million customers are affected, and everyone is freaking out. So it's clear that this is necessary as a tool for us to persist as a community moving forward. And really, I think what we came together to talk about, there were like 14 of us who drafted this this declaration, and I'll drop it in the chat bar so you guys can see it.
Oh, I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the idea behind it is really just revisiting some of the things that have kept us together and the perspectives that have kept us together as a community. And this idea of Aina Aloha, that really this place that we live, that we call home, is meant to, we are meant to embrace, and then it will embrace us. And that, I mean, these values are not new. They're actually thousands of years old, but they're also codified in state law and came up in the 78 Con and have become part of the values that, all of us embrace. The other one would be Opoali'i, this idea that we're all servant leaders and we're trying to keep and make Hawaii a better place. And this idea of Ho'okipa being good stewards of this place and welcoming all people and all ideas and all forms of communication. And then, Bert, to the one that you talked about, this Imi Oikelakela, is really, as we start to think about how it is that we're going to look at how we do business and how we interact as a community, looking to technology has to be one of the pieces of the puzzle to bring the kind of resources that are necessary to keep Hawaii being Hawaii. And whether that's these things like telemedicine or utilizing technology to bring in the kinds of voices and smart people that we need to figure out what's next. And so the basis for those 4 values is really asking the community to come into a conversation that talks about what do we want to do next, as we know that the paradigm that was pre-COVID is not going to be the same paradigm. It can't be. and not because we're here to take it apart, but because it was kind of taken apart for us. And now we have to figure out how to put it back together. And as we do so, those things that we utilize, those tools, those resources, the puzzle pieces are completely different. And this is really like, before I came on this call, you know, I was kind of struggling a little bit to think about like how this fit into broadband. But once you folks brought up this idea of the last mile, it's like, that's what we're talking about, is like, there are so many important voices in that metaphorical set of last miles in our communities, whether it's on the outer islands, whether it's even here, you know, where I live on Oahu, in Ka'ava, is in many ways one of those places. And it's so critical for us as a group of people, as a community, to make sure that those voices are empowered. And so I'll leave you with just really a sense of thanks and mahalo and aloha for you folks for carrying on this work and making sure that those voices are heard and that they do count. And, you know, I'll leave it with that. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
So Nalehu, you know, I think there's a subtlety in the name Aina Aloha, and I know everybody's probably heard Aloha Aina, but tell us a little bit about, you know, the switching of the words from Aloha Aina to Aina Aloha. I think there's a great kauna in that story. Yeah,
I mean, if I'm just going to be completely honest with you folks, like, there is a whole movement that's Aloha Aina, and it has, I mean, it probably spun back up in the 70s, but it was something that's very, very, very ancient. And that movement, I think, has, you know, definite connotations towards perspective and how it is that we embrace this place. But when we started in on this, we didn't want to just co-opt that movement, to be honest. That was the discussion. It was like, we didn't want to just take it and say, okay, well, the Aloha Aina movement is now, you know, this thing that we're doing. It's like, that is ongoing and is still being done to this day. And that the idea of Aina Aloha just really kind of sat with everybody really well as a means to think about and reinterpret our relationship to land and our relationship to this place, and the reciprocal relationship that persists because of the fact that we are so isolated, and all of the things that you guys are actually bringing up in the technical broadband half is really like the reasons why we need to protect and embrace this place as a community.
Great, thanks. You know, another thing too is that you know, when working with some of the Native Americans and First Nation people, they like to refer to the last mile as the first mile, because that's how they get connected, right? So first mile is very important, and especially for Indigenous communities. And I think, you know, with you know, with the work that you folks are doing, and then, you know, I also want to bring attention to the Internet Society. I think Mark Buell is on the call as well. And you know, the Internet Society was very instrumental in helping to get us help to build the awareness of Indigenous connectivity and the challenges that are being faced by communities like that. And you know, my virtual background is about a community that we help connect over at Puhonua or Waimanalo. So I don't know, Mark, you wanna say anything about that?
Yeah, sorry, it's allergy season here. Yeah, you know, the concept of first mile versus last mile is actually fascinating, because it's, when you think of last mile, that implies that you're working from the center, you're working from the center out. And when you label it first mile, it means you start with the community and you focus on the community and what their needs are with regard to connectivity. And then, you know, you bring the community to the broader area, as opposed to, you know, what we see as more of a top-down model, that last mile idea. Yeah, I think, you know, we did we held our Indigenous Connectivity Summit in Hilo last year, which was, you know, an absolutely amazing event. And then the 2.5 days following the summit, right where Bert is virtually sitting right there, deploying a network with the community, which they now own and operate. And we hope to be able to do similar work in Waianae as well, COVID-19 travel permitting.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. And you know, one of the things that really helped to kind of crystallize ideas in my head with regard to the idea of digital equity and what exactly is digital equity and how do we as a state support efforts around digital equity. And again, you know, the work in getting connectivity to, you know, the first mile is definitely part of us and our commitment to connecting not only indigenous communities, but, you know, communities that are considered perhaps even disenfranchised, right? So I think, you know, this Hui has really helped to bring together the right minds and how do we not only look at it from top down, but how do we also look at it from, you know, and I hate to refer to it as bottoms up, but, you know, bottom up approach, but it's definitely a community approach. So I want to, again, thank Nalehu and Aina Aloha. So anybody is interested, check out ainaaloha.com, I think it is. And ainaalohafutures.com. I put it up on the chat. And Nalehu, you're always welcome to join us, you know, on the Broadband Hui as time moves on. But I know you guys got a lot of work to do, you know, in the area of trying to just move, you know, the ideas that you have moving forward. So appreciate your participation.
Yeah, mahalo nui for the time today. Aloha, you folks.
Yep, thanks. So any other questions? Okay, well, hearing none, I want to move on to the next topic. And so a lot of people were kind of, you know, doing their research and looking at the state's role in broadband. And, you know, the state's role in broadband has been a long-standing involvement, probably spanning a better part of a dozen years. And I wanted to invite Lisa Kim talk a little bit about the Broadband Assistance Advisory Council, which resides in DCCA. And so just give it a, you know, kind of a level set as to the various efforts that are going on. You know, we in DBED are kind of working on, we have a sort of an economic development focus. You know, we've been trying to get some money to do the cable landing, but as I described in, you know, in the website I put together, you know, there's areas from cable landing all the way to inter-island fiber to terrestrial backhaul to getting, you know, connectivity out to rural communities. So we've definitely broadened our perspective. But Lisa, you wanna provide a perspective on the BAAC?
Sure, thanks, Bert. Basically, just for background, the BAC was created by legislation in 2010 to advise the director of DCCA on policy and funding priorities for the promotion and development of affordable, accessible broadband services in Hawaii. The BAC is composed of the DCCA director as chair, and DBED director is also a permanent member as well. It's also made up of 12 additional members appointed by the Senate President and House Speaker. In making the appointments, the Senate President and the House Speaker is to ensure that representation of the City and County of Honolulu and each of the other counties are on the council by at least one member. The DCCA also invites other stakeholders to participate, such as representatives of the wireless providers and other state agencies. Currently, as indicated prior, the members include the DCCA director as chair, Mike McCartney from DBED or his designee. We also have Senator Baker and Keith Argon, Representative Nakamura, Yamashita. We also have Douglas Murdoch from ETS. We have a representative from DOT. We have county representatives, Tony Velasco from the City and County of Honolulu, as well as Jules from the County of Hawaii. We have AT&T represented by Brian Ito. We have a seat for Hawaiian Telecom, Ray Fujimoto from Oceanic Spectrum, that is, as well as HICO by Wendy Hildebrand. Since the beginning of the BAC, we've been able to discuss matters and keep stakeholders apprised of various issues and programs related to broadband infrastructure, deployment, and service. Background information on the BAC and its activities, including meeting minutes, reports, can be found on the Cable Television Division broadband webpage. So that's some of the background with regards to the BAC.
Thanks, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa regarding the BAC? I'll put the link up on the in the chat.
Thanks, Bert.
Bert?
Yes.
Hi, Lisa, I'm sorry if you already covered this, but how often do you meet?
Basically, we meet at the request of the, we don't have a schedule.
Oh, I see, okay.
Right.
All right.
So basically, we average about 2 meetings a year because the situation is a little separate from the Hui. The Hui is a little bit more fluid and able to meet more frequently and all that. For the BAC, it's a little bit more formalized. We're not a sunshine board, and it's an advisory board completely, but we have to, you know, meet some of the state guidelines with regards to having the agenda up for 7 days on the lieutenant governor's site and all that. So it's a little harder for us to do sometimes.
Okay.
But we try to do it twice a year or at least once a year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you know, and the folks over at DCCA, they do a great job of capturing all the minutes. I mean, our minutes don't even compare to the kind of detail that they produce in their minutes. So, you know, hats off to them. But they are definitely obligated to you know, meet some of the, not obligated in a formal way, but Sunshine requires a lot of notification and note taking and you know, sharing of that meeting to the rest of the public. The Hui, of course, is more of a voluntary general stakeholder gathering, and you know, we are able to, you know, do this on a much more frequent and quote unquote sort of informal basis. But I think through the power of everybody here on the call, you know, you empower it as much as you want to. So, you know, that's kind of the strength of the Hui coming from the community. Any other questions for Lisa? Well, thanks Lisa for joining us, and of course you're more than welcome to stay on and you know, chime in whenever you feel appropriate. So the next one, you know, we'll keep all of these on the agenda, right? But none of them, well, if there's no real update, and of course, you know, we have a weekly call, so you know, updates don't necessarily happen every week. But you know, the fact that Hawaiian Tau wanted to share their plans to get to HANA, and you know, they've been very forthright about sharing what path they're taking. We've got a couple people that have joined the call because specifically about connectivity to HANA, you know, including Bill and Don Lono, and as well as Senator Kalani English. So any updates on that? Ani, do you want to share anything on your side?
Thanks, Bert. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's having a fairly easy morning. No updates that I think are significant for this group at this point in time. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions about the project. As you all know, fiber connectivity, and especially when we're building new infrastructure out to rural communities, can take a little bit of time. It's for various reasons, but right now, in terms of the easement piece, our team is working diligently to locate the best possible places of easements along the route, the southern route that we plan on taking. It takes a lot of technical calculation of where infrastructure should be placed. So this is one of the most critical steps before we can reach out to the landowners and describe exactly where these easement locations are going to be. They want to make sure that, you know, this step is not rushed over. So once I have more information and once our network team solidifies our plans, we will be sharing them with Senator English, who has, I mentioned in the past, so generously offered to help us reach out to all the landowners and acquire the easements, or at least attempt to acquire the easements. And then we'll of course keep this group updated so you all know, where we are in the timeline of deploying.
So Ani, one of the things that the bill has brought to my attention, which, oftentimes we talk about fiber to HANA, and HANA seems to be like the end point of that fiber run. But Bill has sort of brought this perspective to me about, getting it over to Kenai and how the communities along the way to HANA, along the south route, could potentially benefit from this. So I don't know, could you share a little bit about, some of the communities along the way and how would they actually benefit? And this kind of goes to maybe Mark's question about last mile. I mean, if the fiber's coming through, what provisions are provided to actually provide last mile connectivity?
Yeah, Bert, that's a fantastic question. Thanks for bringing it up. In fact, 2 times now, Don Lono has mentioned to me, and I've made a point of correcting myself. We continue to call this the HANA project because it's kind of colloquially used within our organization to reference, but it's really an East Maui connectivity project. We can't get our fiber to HANA without going through East Maui first and foremost. And the reason we call it HANA is because the Connect America funds that we were granted, that we won as part of the Connect America Fund auction, were for HANA. But like with every project that we undertake, no matter whether it's funded by Connect America Fund dollars or our private dollars, as an organization, we make the strategic decision to deploy fiber along the way, along the route to that particular location. So in this case, Bert, to your point, we will be connecting most all of East Maui. So one of the initial PowerPoint slides, I think that Kalani shared around where the landowners are, where infrastructure is going. We had a route there on the southern route that we indicated, and it shows exactly where that I don't know if it shows exactly where our route will go through, but it definitely shows the region that we plan on deploying infrastructure. And in terms of that last mile, our entire goal as an organization is to deploy as much fiber as possible throughout Hawaii. So we will be attempting to connect as many locations as possible throughout East Maui as we make our way to Hana.
I have a question on that. I was informed by Dan Masatumi that the funding was going to be for KNI because HANA already had broadband spectrum, and they were going to go to the outlying community of KNI, and they were originally going to run it down from the north side, but now they're running it from the south, so it goes through all of the other communities to reach KNI. Mm-hmm. Is that right? I mean, now you're saying it's a HANA project. I thought it was a KNI project.
Yeah.
But
it definitely,
there are a lot. Go ahead.
I hear you. Yeah, it definitely is a conversation. I know that's been ongoing for quite a while now. I know when Kalani presented on this a few meetings ago, he mentioned that we've been trying to connect East Maui, or Hana at least, specifically for the last 15 years. Initially, you're right, the route was to go north. And I know that there are a lot of considerations we make when deploying infrastructure, and geography sometimes plays a huge toll in what routes become feasible ultimately. I know that in our most latest assessment, the northern route was just not feasible, and the southern route would serve more locations, and in terms of the last mile particularly. So our team decided to go that route. This project very much does cover HANA. The Connect America funds, like I mentioned, that we won, are particularly for HANA, and all the locations that we would connect along the way in East Maui would be privately funded, but even more so, it would be definitely part of the overall project.
I was just wondering, I started out this project well, the HANA Broadband Committee, several years ago to improve connections over here. And now it's evolved into, where we're got the service, but we're upgrading it. We all knew it was going to need fiber optic to become viable as a system. And I'm trying to figure out how to best connect up all the kids, because they're going to get left behind if we don't get them hooked up on broadband. So that's one issue I'm trying to deal with. And the other one was how to get the community to get together along with the county and the different government agencies to best use this system coming in. And I'm not sure of who to get connected up with that. So anybody on this Hui who would be interested in helping our community understand the possibilities and directions to take with the incoming fiber, I'd be interested in hearing from them.
Bill, it's also my understanding that you've been having conversations with our network team, particularly Dan. I know that he is instrumental in the planning of this project, so he's definitely the right contact from internally from the Hawaiian Telecom side.
Okay.
So I would continue having conversations with him. It was also my understanding that these conversations have been fruitful, and it is our intention. I think anybody you talk to who is working on this project will tell you it's our intention to deploy or at least connect as many locations as possible, and to really serve the East Maui community. So any way we can do that, if you have ideas, if you see that there are gaps in planning or whatever it is, please feel free to continue having that conversation with Dan and his team. Bring it to my attention, and you can also bring it to this group, and we can resolve it all together. But it definitely is our intention to connect as many community members in East Maui as possible.
Dan's always been good to work with. He even returned a call from Japan to me one time. I was amazed. But yeah, I'm just mainly, like I say, but others as well. I would like to get some people involved from the educational side, from the county side, from the state side. I know Kalani's working on the easements, but as far as if there's any maps of where the lines are going to run, from my understanding from Dan, they're going to run everywhere eventually that the telephone lines run. But the length of the Hana Highway is, I would say, almost halfway around Oahu as a length of connectivity. You've got a lot of people there. Some of them are not within reach. And we have a lot of bridges and things that go out so that the students have to be connected to the school system during those times. Or as an example, a few years back, the bridge went out between Kipahulu and Hana. And so this broadband connectivity is going to be it's going to bring the children and the district up to the modern age and where they're not losing out anymore on and can get into a fiber optic age, and connect up those kids is where my concerns are, and how the technology can best do that. If hubs are to be put in or whatever. So anybody but help on that would help too. Okay.
Absolutely. Bill, you're breaking up a little bit there, but I think I understood most of what you were saying, and we're definitely in alignment. Whatever we can do to serve the community in East Maui, we will definitely undertake. In our last conversation with Senator English, we also discussed that sometimes it's hard to identify whether there are families that need to be served in various communities just based on the geography and the way, the multi-generational families who live together but separate. So we would love to work with the community there to identify all the homes to make sure we don't leave out locations if they're not on maps, or if we don't have a tangible preset way of identifying the home. If there is no address associated, for example, or if they're for whatever reason omitted from the maps that we would have on hand. So anything we could do to thoroughly cover East Maui, we would appreciate the support of the community for sure.
Thanks, Ani. I want to also bring up the fact that, as the fiber is deployed along that East Maui route, that's where, you know, this Hui can actually be very, not only influential, but, you know, if we are successful at moving forward on any kind of innovation grant program or programs that help to foster community networks, you know, this is the time to put those thinking caps on and seeing, you know, what communities in those areas would benefit from this, and are there members in that community that would help to champion, you know, a deployment, let's say, of a community network, much like we did in Puhonua or Waimanalo. And we want to do that in Waianae, but we want to do this across the islands in the state. So again, if Hawaiian is running fiber along that route, are there ways that we could help to move infrastructure in the form of innovative ways like community networks to get people connected? And again, so it behooves us to come up with those projects, as well as identify people who would support, you know, the community in terms of deployment, and that's where Hawaiian Tel would benefit from, you know, getting more users, and that drives adoption, right? So again, that's, you know, it's not like just, okay, so Hawaiian Tel, just do your thing and we're done. It's like, how do we as a community support the fact that infrastructure is running through East Maui now?
That's so great. That's such a good point. Yeah, absolutely. So I will, it's our intention to continue to keep this group updated. We don't have, like I said, the technical route finalized, and we're still working on the details of where exactly those easements for infrastructure would need to be deployed. So nothing that we feel comfortable sharing at this point because it's not final. But once we do have a final route set, and once we have discussed this already with the various key stakeholders in order to acquire those easements, we'll bring it up to this group as well and discuss how best we can inform the community, and what else we can do, and what other avenues we can take to holistically consider connectivity for that community.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ani.
Regarding what you said there,
I know.
Regarding what you said about connecting the communities up, yeah, we are getting people from KNI, Nahiku, and Uliino and stuff on our group. So we are taking that direction, trying to get feedback from each community. What we're kind of lacking, though, is the feedback from the government entities that would be using it as well, to determine how the best they could use it, whether it would be dark fiber or buying bandwidth and stuff. So those are the people I'm trying to get in touch with. But yeah, you're right. We need the communities of each, you know, people representing each area, each little small village along the way to speak up.
Yeah, for sure. So we want to, again, keep this conversation going. And again, you know, the carriers are doing their thing, and from a community standpoint, you know, how can we now take advantage of them coming through the community? So again, that's where community networks come in. That's where we could, you know, deploy telehealth services. We can do other things like the next topic that I wanted to kind of talk about, which I kind of went out of order, and I wanted to do some sharing about the Telework subgroup. Now, I do know that some people are having to leave for other appointments and meetings, so I thank you all for for staying on with us for at least the first hour. So typically this call goes to 10:30, and again, I wanted to give some fair time to some of the topics that we've been talking about. And the next one that had some pretty good traction this past week was our convening of the Telework subgroup, and a couple of people that were on that call. Mark Gregory was on the call. I think I'm not sure if Liza's on this call, but Liza from Instant Teams was on the call, as well as Kiala Peters from the chamber. And I'll go ahead and summarize, what the call was about, and then if Mark or Kiala, you want to chime in, feel free. So telework has always been something on our agenda to kind of keep an eye on, and much like whether it's distance learning, or I forgot Brooke was also on the call. Hey Brooke. So much like whether it's distance learning or telehealth, access to government services, telework was something that everybody was, in essence, forced to do because of the pandemic. So if everybody's now at home, whether you've got students at home or parents at home, you're going to be looking at how do you work from home. So we were really interested in how do we move any agenda forward on the telework front. So what I wanted to do is, convene a group to kind of talk about what are some of the issues that a telework environment would need to be created in order to foster a telework, let's say, economic sector. And when I look at telework, I mean, it's a whole spectrum of work that is involved. It could be from an entry-level standpoint where you're doing some support work for remote call centers. You could be doing customer support. You could be doing, as you go up the ladder, you could be doing technical support. And then even as you get to a level of, whether there's companies like the Googles or the Facebooks or the Twitters that are looking at enabling their workers to work remotely, is there an opportunity to get expats to come back to Hawaii and actually work from here in a telework environment? So how does that actually work, and how does the state actually create environment to foster the growth of telework? So that's kind of basically what the call was about, and it was a really good understanding, I think, as far as the first call goes, what some of the challenges are, and what was fairly apparent to us was that there is some legislation that makes it difficult for a company, let's say a mainland-based company, that wants to actually employ teleworkers from Hawaii. And I think it boils down to the designation of whether they're an employee or whether they're an independent contractor. So that's what kind of came out of that call, and what we are looking at. And I don't know if we have time for this legislative session, but there is the potential for some legislation that could take a look at what are some of the restrictions or the laws that prevent, let's say, independent contractors from actually building a business out here in Hawaii. I wanted to share that. I mean, and that's this is going to be an ongoing discussion on our part in terms of how do we foster this telework environment. And I wanted to give whether it's Brooke or Mark or Kiala, one of the ideas is how do we come up with a pilot, right? And one of the suggested pilots would involve the DOE. I mean, this is a kind of a big undertaking with that as well. So, Brooke, you wanna say anything about some of the thoughts that were shared on the telework subgroup?
So there were a couple of things. So first of all, the DOE is actively looking at what parts of the organization as a whole can permanently move to either partial or full-time telework basis. Obviously, the technology team is kind of high on that list. We effectively did a couple of small-scale pilots with that before the COVID situation went on. One of my direct reports was based on Maui, even though the position was formally on Oahu, and he was managing people on Oahu. But now we're very actively looking into what does it take to do that for large numbers of DOE employees. Not necessarily the teachers when kids are actually showing up in the classroom, but certainly the systems of support that we have to make the teachers successful a lot of that work can be done remotely. Of course, there's some opportunities for innovation in terms of when we are in a distance learning or a blended learning situation, are there ways that we can provide extra support to the kids that need it? That ranges from things like the Ohana Help Desk that we're starting to build out to give tech support to the families of our students. Obviously, a help desk is something that can be run remotely. We're looking at a partnership to get that in place for the start of school, but also things like tutors or additional work from people that are qualified teachers but are substitute teachers at this time to provide extra support for those kids. If they're in a distance learning mode, then of course that kind of work can be done in a remote way. We have a couple of other interesting small scale cases, for instance, for some of our more remote locations. We have special student support. So for instance, we have a few students on Molokai that need speech therapists. We don't have enough students on Molokai to justify a full-time position there. So they've been using WebEx and video conferencing to do speech therapy with those students for well over a year at this point. So we're looking at doing all of that. That's the work side of the digital transformation that the superintendent alluded to last week at this meeting, and there will be a lot more on that coming up. We've got a lot of meetings on advancing that, so there will be a lot more coming out for that. The digital transformation, of course, focuses on the students. That's our mission. That's where it should be. But if the students are doing things remotely and digitally as well, then obviously employees are going to be in the same boat.
Thanks, Brooke. Hey, Mark, I know you're on the call as well, and from a private sector standpoint, especially you located in a rural community on Kauai. I mean, what was your take of that first telework meeting?
It was centered around the DOE, but other subjects came up, and you touched upon them. One is how difficult it is to bring expats back because they can't work typically as a contractor based on rules. If you have to show up at a certain time, if you have that type of thing, that you're not a contractor, you're an employee. I think there was a big ruling in California on Lyft about what an employee is. And Hawaii has a lot of that same definition. If you have to show up 9 to 5, you're an employee, you're not a contractor. And then if you are an employee, that company, if it's not a Hawaii-based company, has to register here, has to provide the right insurances and things like that. If they're self-insured like Visa and some of these other big companies, that and if they're privately held, they have to show documentation of their finances. And this happened to my wife. So it can be real difficult. The entry into hiring people from Hawaii as employees is not easy. And one of the things I was thinking about since our meeting is people using HR and payroll firms that are basically nationwide, and utilizing those to leverage the ability to hire people from anywhere in the country. And it's something I'm looking at doing right now as a business. So there's some interesting things going on in our little subcommittee, and I think there's gonna be great topics coming up in the next few weeks.
So Mark, to that point, you brought up the HR companies. Is that a workaround? Is that a solution?
If they have a presence in 50 states, and some of them do, there are some that are nationwide, they can provide the financial references and acquire the appropriate insurances for. It's one of the difficulties is providing the right kind of insurance that Hawaii requires for employees. And the same with me, if I go to hire people from Oregon and Washington and who knows where, is I have to meet those requirements. It's something I'd like to do. I'd like to hire, I can't find the right people on Kauai. Oahu opens it up quite a bit where I might be able to find some of the right people on Oahu, but I may have to go to the mainland too, with the way I'm remodeling my business, to get some of the help I need. And I'm going to remain a Hawaii company. So how do I do it? So I'm jumping, I'm obviously learning quickly and have some hoops to jump through to make it happen.
Right, and if you know, if the choice was to hire people in Oregon versus hire people in Hawaii, I mean, obviously, you know, we'd like to hire people in Hawaii, because I think one of the telework objectives was how do we help to address the current large population of unemployed workers in Hawaii, and if telework could be a way to help fill that capacity, then you know that's what we want to do. So again, it's telework. It's telework with workers here in Hawaii that could help fulfill those jobs, and we'll continue you know this discussion moving forward. Keala, did you want to say anything about our subgroup?
No, I have nothing to add to what Mark and Brooke mentioned, but we're ready to help, especially on the legislative side, if we think there are some opportunities to remove barriers that are in place.
Okay, thanks, Keala. Okay, so with that, I did want to, give a chance to any of the other subgroups that wanted to provide us with any updates. You know, one of the things that I've been challenged with is, how do I shorten the introductions, and how do we give time to the various projects that are being worked on, in the form of the subgroups. So what I try to do is I try to give some time for the new projects that are kind of coming into play, and that's kind of what we did today. But not to diminish any of the work that other people are doing, whether it's, I know Miller had to leave, but we want to continue this conversation about the regional hubs. We want to talk about digital literacy, community networks. So any of the topics that we have been previously talking about, I'm open to giving you some time to give us an update as to what's been happening.
The hardware subgroup, we sent another 50 computers over to Big Island. They are distributing them this week and next week. And so it looks like they're going to go to 2 sites, 10 computers to one group and 40 computers to another group. And we're looking forward to our next distribution as well.
Hey, Curtis, thanks for jumping on, because Curtis has been on the calls from day one, and one of the challenges that he's expressed is just not only he's providing a great service, and it's the idea that the chances are for a family that is not connected to the internet, the chances are they probably don't have a computer as well, and that's why there's a synergy between the hardware piece, the connectivity piece, as well as the digital literacy piece. So Curtis, what's the latest on your effort to do like a warehousing and trying to move your process along to be more kind of efficient?
We are still kind of negotiating for a new warehouse space. We've had about 4 or 5 phone calls at this point with a prospective partner organization. I don't want to quite name them yet, but they haven't said no, so that's a good sign. Our existing square footage is about 16 to 1,800 square feet, and we're trying to get into something that is 5,000 square feet or larger, maybe up to 10,000 square feet. So that's, as I said from day one, our physical space is our single, really, and only limitation. Last year we took in about 6,000 computers. If we had more physical space, we could probably take in 20, 30,000 machines. So, yeah, but we're still working on that. We haven't really made a giant step forward at all, but they haven't said no. So
Curtis, innovation grant program could be a way to get some funding. I know you've mentioned this before, but have you tried the GIA, the Grant and Aid program?
In the past, we've tried 2 times recently for GIA grants. One was, I think, 2017. We applied for $75,000. And it was kind of a mixed project where, part of it was to give away 2,000 machines. And the second part of it was to, after we reduced inventory a bit, then to move us to a new physical location. And that, we didn't get any traction or feedback on that. And then in 2019, we applied for a GIA as well. It was, I think, $65,000, $63,000. And that kind of same thing was to, part one, give away 2,000 computers. And then the second part of it would be to retool our existing infrastructure, set up new servers, new procedures, buy new tools and gadgets to actually make the process faster, while we're working on the machines. And same thing, that didn't get any traction either.
So I guess maybe my suggestion is that if you the GIA program is still going to get some funding. So if you go that route and you let us know as far as the actual GIA grant that you're applying to, I mean, what I understand is that people can support GIA projects, and if we can submit some support from the Hui or from various participants on an organizational or individual basis for what you're trying to do, I think that might help, because I think you've been trying to do it pretty much single-handedly. So if the Hui can provide some support in terms of your project, I'm sure if you share what you're trying to do, I mean, I'm sure we can get the support.
That would seriously be appreciated. I mean, our full annual budget, considering everything we do, like I said, last year we gave away 1,500 computers, and in doing that, our entire annual budget's under $100,000. So it's we're pretty efficient at what we do. We've no payroll, and so all the money we actually get goes toward storage of the machines and inventory and buying parts to refurbish them. So yeah, we're kind of efficient at what we do. But yeah, it's physical space is just, it's been our limitation. We've been doing this from 2006, and from about 2007, the physical space has been a limitation. So.
Well, again, the Hui, I think is a supportive group. So if there's ways that we could, if not through immediate funding through any kind of innovation grant, I mean, if you do decide that you want to go the GIA route, I mean, we could definitely help support, that effort in the form of testimony, what have you. You're doing good work.
Thank you, Bert. Just so you know, the speaker and I issued a press release before the last time we went into session that GIAs were not going to be available because of our financial situation. The money was deployed to the county. So we certainly hope the GIA program will be back and available for applications next year.
No, okay, thanks, President. Appreciate that update. So, again, I think a lot of the groups on the call, I mean, they've been very resourceful in terms of looking for whatever funding avenues are available. So, if government is prioritizing their funding, then projects like this need to probably look at the philanthropic support, whether it's places like Hawaii Community Foundation or Kamehameha Schools or others. So, and again, Curtis, I mean, if there's support that the Hui can provide, even with those philanthropic sources, I mean, I think we'd be happy to support that.
No, we definitely appreciate it. Just one quick kind of note in here, a little big plug. The cost for us to actually refurbish a computer and get it redistributed back out to somebody is under $100 per machine, and usually it's floating somewhere around $50 per machine. So, it's not a lot of cost. Usually, when we get computers donated to us, like we get a lot from Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian Bank, and Queens Hospital and some others. Usually, the only thing that's wrong with them is that it's missing a hard drive. So it's a matter of, spending a few bucks on a machine, buying some extra parts, and then redoing it, cleaning it out and redoing it. So the cost per unit is really low, and just everybody, take that into consideration. So.
Well, and then, we talked about it a little bit last week, is the Charter has an education grant that they have available. And again, you can go to the website, go to broadband.hawaii.gov. I posted a link there, and that is another source that you might be able to tap. So, hey, go for whatever's out there, and best of luck, and we'll support you guys. So with that, we're at the 10:30 mark. I want to thank you all again for joining the Broadband Hui meetup. I would open it up to any last comments. Jeannie, you have any comments at the end here?
No, another good meeting. Look forward to next week.
Okay, sounds good. We'll definitely have an update on the bills that are going through, and as the week goes by, there's always advancements of any of these subgroups. So we'll keep you folks all posted. So with that, next meeting is going to be on the 24th, same time, and I'll send the invite out. And of course, in the meantime, you guys all stay safe and you stay awesome. Thank you.